Hello, welcome to our lesson on trigonometry, and we are going to look at trigonometric ratio of general angles. Alright, in our previous lesson, we considered trigonometric ratio of 30 degrees, 45, and then 60 degrees. Now we are going to look at the general angle, okay, that is from 0 to 360 degrees. Alright. So we are going to consider trigonometric ratios of the various angles, not only acute. Okay, we look at the obtuse and then the reflex also. All right. So first of all, what we should know is that angles in trigonometry are measured, okay, from the positive x-axis in an anti-clockwise direction. Okay, so this is my y-axis, this is my s-axis. All right. Angles are measured from the positive, so this is the positive s-axis here, the negative, the positive y-axis, and the negative y-axis. All right, so we measure the angle from where? From the positive s-axis in an anti-clockwise direction, anti-clockwise this way. All right. Okay, so we are going to see what will happen. So if we measure from the positive s side, then the 0 degrees will start from here, and then this side will be 90 degrees plus 90, 180 degrees, and then 270 degrees, and then 360 degrees. All right, so this is how it is going to be. Okay, so we measure the angle from here, positive s and in an anti-clockwise direction. All right, so this from 0 to 90 degrees is called the first quadrant. Okay, and what is a quadrant? When you have quadrant, is a quarter of a circle. So when I go around this, you see that I'm getting what? A full circle, which is 360 degrees. So the first quadrant is just a quarter of a full circle, and then from 90 to 180 is then we call the second quadrant. 180 to 270 is the third quadrant, and 270 degrees to become the fourth quadrant. All right, so the first quadrant, second, third, and fourth. Okay, and let's see what will happen in all the quadrants. All right, so in the first quadrant, we are going to see what can happen in the first quadrant. So in the first quadrant, what we should know is that one, angles are between 0 and what? 90 degrees. So acute. So in the first quadrant, the angles are between 0 and what? 90. That is the first quadrant, acute. And what happened in the first quadrant is that sine, cos, and tan are positive. Alright, so in the first quadrant, you realize that when we were dealing with the 30 degree, the 60, and then the 45, all of them gave us a positive value. So in the first quadrant, when you have any angle, okay, if you can take your calculator and do that, and then you press on maybe sine 70, sine 30, whatever it is, cos and tan. If the angle is between 0 and 90, it will definitely give you what? A positive answer. That is what we are talking about. Okay, so that is what will happen in the first quadrant. Let's come to the second quadrant and see what will happen. In the second quadrant, number one, what you should know in the second quadrant, angles are between what? Angles are between 90 and then 180. So angles are between 90 and 180. Okay, And 90 and 180 is what? Is obtuse. Alright, so from 0 to 90 is acute. Then on the 90, we get what? We get a right angle. Alright, then 90, between 90 and 180 is obtuse. Okay, and from 180 to 360, we have the reflex. Alright, and what happened to the sine, the cos, and the tan? What happened is that in the second quadrant, sine is positive, cos and tan are negative. In the second quadrant, sine is positive. So, if you like, you can take your calculator. If I put, let's say, sine, let me pick an angle in the second quadrant, maybe 100. And try and see. Sine 100 will give you positive value, which is 0.9, maybe 848. But try cos and see. Maybe cos angle between 90 and 180 can be cos 120. Let's see what we are going to get for cos 120. Negative 1 over 2. Because the angle is between 90 and 180, it is giving me a negative value. Let's see, you can try tan and see. Maybe tan 150. 150 is between 190 and 180. Tan 150, it will give you negative root 3 on 3. You see? So it is telling you that when the angle is between 90 and 180, sine is positive, cos and tan are negative. Alright. So that is what is happening here. Okay. Let's go to the third quadrant and see. Angles are between, so there's a 180 and 270. So that is what is happening in the third quadrant. In the third quadrant, which one of them is positive? Okay, in the third quadrant, what we should note is that tan is positive, cos and sine are negative. So in the third quadrant, tan is positive, cos and sine they are negative. So let's say if I have tan 200, you see 200 is between 180 and 270. Tan 200 is giving me positive 0.36397. Let me talk about cos. Let's say 250 and see. Cos 250 negative 0.342. It is telling that because it is in the third quadrant, sine whatever angle can I even take? Sine 220. Let's see. Negative 0.64279. Alright. So you realize that if the angles are between 180 and 270, only tan is getting me positive. The rest are giving me what? A negative value. Alright. So that happens. That is what happens in the third quadrant. Let's look at the last one, the fourth quadrant. Angles are between 270 and 360 degrees. Alright. Number 2. What is left? Cos. Cos is positive. Tan and sine are negative. Tan and sine are negative. So let's assume that I have cos 300 between 270 and 360. And let's see what I'll get. Cos 300 is giving me 1/2 positive. Let's say I have tan 330. Tan 330. I have minus with 3 on 3. And let's say I have sine 345. And let's see. Sine 345. It's minus 0.2588. You see? So only cos is giving me a positive value when the angles are between 270 and 360. Alright, so that is what happens in the fourth quadrant. So in short, okay, we have an abbreviation here. It says C, cos is positive, A, all are positive, S and T. We call it cast, C-A-S-T. Where cast, we start from the fourth quadrant. It means cos is positive. All, the A means all the trigonometric ratio, sine, cos and tan are all positive. The S means sine is positive. And the T means tan is what? Tan is positive. So that is what you can do, and then you will memorize where the trigonometric ratio is what? Is positive. I believe this is clear. Okay. So we are going to solve some few questions on this. Alright. Okay. So with the general angles, you know that we learned in the acute, we learned in the first quadrant some special angles like 30, 60 and what? And then the 45. Okay, so we are also going to look at how we can get these angles, okay, in the other quadrant. Alright, so that when you are asked to solve a question without using calculator, okay, you'll be able to write the value of the angle, okay, in this special angle, that is a 30, the 60 and the 45, and then you can be able to solve. Alright, so we know that in the first quadrant, okay, the first quadrant is the acute. Alright, so we said we measure from 0, 90, that's the first quadrant. So the angle under consideration, since we measure from the positive x-axis in an anti-clockwise direction, so the first quadrant will be an acute, okay, which may be here. That is the angle. Alright, so let's say that when I'm asked to find, let's say sine 30 degrees, sine 30 is what? 1/2. It falls within the acute. So in the first quadrant, whatever angle you are given in the first quadrant, you work with that. Okay, so that one is so simple. Okay, so let's look at the second quadrant. So we know in the second quadrant, the angles are between what? 90 and then 180. Okay. So what we are going to do is that we are also going to find an acute angle in the second quadrant. Okay. So that though we are given the angle between 90 and 180, we are going to what? We are going to write the angle as what? As acute. So that you bring the angle as acute and then we are going to work with. So how do we get an angle in the second quadrant which is acute, which is the same as the value of the angle given in the second quadrant? Alright, so the second quadrant falls within here. So if I'm given the angle, and the angle will be from here, let's say to this particular place. Okay, so this will be my angle, let's say theta. So let's assume that I'm giving, let's say 200 degrees. 200 degrees, it will pass the 90 and then be here. Alright, so if I'm looking for the acute angle, then I have to look for the acute angle, okay, on the x-axis. All right, so I'll look for the acute angle on the x-axis, which will be the angle here, the associated acute angle on the x-axis. So take note, from here to here is 180, and if I'm given the angle in the second quadrant, then how do I get the angle here? So I will subtract the angle given from 180, and that will be 180 minus theta. You see that? So that will be 180 minus theta. So if I want to get an angle given the second quadrant, I want to write as acute, then I'll subtract the angle from 180, and I'll get what? The angle as acute, which is on what? On the x-axis. So what we are going to do is to find the angle on the x-axis in that particular quadrant. All right. So example, if I'm asked to find, let's say, sine 120 degrees, you see that 120 is between 90 and 180. That will be what? This is how you are going to write it. Okay, you write as sine is 180 minus theta, so 180 minus 120. All right, and what is 180 minus 120? 180 minus 120 will give us what? Will give us 60. All right. And then what will be sine 60? It's going to give us root 3 on 2. So you realize that if you put sine 120, it will give you the same answer as what? Root 3 on 2. So you can try that. Sine 120. It is the same root 3 on 2. Okay, so I've been able to write the value, okay, of the angle which is in the second quadrant as an acute, and it's giving me the same what? The same answer. But take note, you have to consider the quadrant in which you are working with. 120 is in which quadrant? It's in the second quadrant. So it means that the second quadrant, sine is what? Sine is positive. Okay. C-A-S-T. So in the second quadrant, sine is positive. So it means that sine 120 will give me what? Root 3 on 2. The same thing. It will be positive. Okay. Alright. Another example. Let me go to, let's say, cos 150. Then 150 is in the second quadrant. So that will be what? Cos 180 minus 150. Alright, so what is 180 minus 150? That is 30. Okay. So what trigonometric ratio am I using here? I'm using cos. And what is the angle? 150. 150 is in which quadrant? It's in the second quadrant. And the second quadrant, what happens to cos? Cos is negative in the second quadrant. So the moment you write this, then next, before you write the acute, make sure you put the negative behind, because cos is negative in the second quadrant. And 180 minus 150 will give me 30. So that's what if I put cos 30, what answer I'll get? I will attach the negative, because cos is negative in the second quadrant. So what is cos 30? That is also root 3 on 2. So that will become negative root 3 on 2. So if you like put cos 150 on the calculator, cos 150 will give me negative root 3 on 2. Negative root 3 on 2. Alright, is that okay? So let's go to the third quadrant, okay? Then that one we'll also try with term and so. So the third quadrant. Alright, so the third quadrant too, you find the acute angle. Okay. So the third quadrant, the angle is between what? 180 and then 270. I think we are measuring the angle from here. Okay, so if the angle from here to here is theta, because the angle is between 180 and 270. Then I'll find the acute on what? On the x-axis, the associated angle on the x-axis here. So my acute angle will be here. So how do I get the angle here? this particular angle here. How do I get the angle here? Alright, only the angle here. So what we should know is that from here to here is what? Theta. So if I want to get the angle here, how do I get the angle here? It means that the angle is more than 180. So if from here to here, from 0 to this place is 180, it means that if I subtract 180 from the angle, I'll get this particular angle here. Is that not so? Yes. So the angle here, the acute angle will be theta minus 580 degrees. So that if I subtract the angle given from 180, because from here to here is the angle given. So the moment I take off the 180, then what is left is the acute angle on the S axis, and that is what I'm looking for. Alright. Okay, so it means that in the third quadrant, whatever angle you are given, you subtract 180 from it. Okay, alright. So example, let's look at tan 210 degrees. Tan 210 will be what? Tan 210 minus 180. Okay, what will be 210 minus 180? That will give us 30 degrees. That is 210 minus 180. And you see, tan is positive in the third quadrant, so there is no need to attach any negative to it. Alright, so what will be tan 30? Tan 30 is root 3 over 3. Tan 30 is root 3 over 3. And when you put tan 210 on the calculator, you get the same value. Is that okay? You get the same value. Another one, let's say sine 240 degrees. Sine 240. So that will be sine of 240 minus 180. Okay. So what will be 240 minus 180? 240 minus 180. I think that will be 60. So what is sine in this angle here is what? It's in the third quadrant. So what is sine in the third quadrant? Sine in the third quadrant is negative. So you attach your negative sine what? Sine 60. So sine 60 is root 3 over 2. So that will be minus root 3 on 2. So if you like, put sine 240 on the calculator, you get the same thing. Sine 240 will give you minus root 3 on 2. Alright, because 240 is in the third quadrant. Okay, let's look at the last quadrant, the fourth quadrant, and see how we are going to find the acute. So the fourth quadrant is between 270 and 360, alright? So you find, so if this is the angle, you find the angle, okay, the associated angle on the S axis. So the acute angle on the S axis here. We know that from here, moving from the 0 to here will give you 360. So it means that if the angle from here to here, okay, is theta, then if I want to get the angle on the S axis here, then that will be what? 360 minus the angle. 360 minus the angle. So let's say from here to here is what? It's 300. Then what is left is the angle here. And that will be 360 minus 300. Then I'll know the angle here. So if I want to know the angle here, then what happens is that I'll subtract whatever angle I have here. Because from here, if I move from the 0 up to this place, it's 360. Alright, so if I have the angle up to this place and I want to know here, then I'll subtract the angle from 360. Then I'll get this particular angle here. The acute angle on the S axis. Is that okay? So here, let me give an example. So if I have cos 330 degrees, then that will be what? It's between 270 and 360. Cos 360 minus 330. And that will give us what? 360 minus 330 will give us 30. And because cos is positive in the third quadrant, then there will be no negative. So cos 30 will give us what? Root 3 on 2. It means that if you press cos 330, you get the same root 3 on 2. Is that okay? Root 3 on 2. Let me try the last example. Maybe using tan. Maybe tan 315 will be what? Tan 360 minus 315. Alright, 360 minus 315. And then 315 falls within the fourth quadrant. So 360 minus 315 will give me 45. And because tan is negative in the fourth quadrant, which is 315, then let me write it here. I can write it as what? Minus tan 45 degrees. 360 minus 315 is 45, but 315 is in the fourth quadrant. In the fourth quadrant, tan is negative. So I will attach the negative sign. Alright, so I have minus tan 45. And what is tan 45? 1, so negative 1. It means that if you press tan 350 on the calculator, it is going to give you negative 1. Negative 1. Okay. So I think you get this and you have understood how the various angles behave in each quadrant. Is that okay? When we meet another time, we solve some questions with this particular knowledge we have here. Alright, I will see you again in our next lesson. Bye bye.